tonight to introduce our speaker, David. He's from Chicago, and I'm looking forward to hearing his experience, strength, and hope. So come on in, David. Thank you so much for your service.
Recording in progress.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is David. I'm an alcoholic, and I'm grateful to be here. Thank you for the introduction, Eric. Thank you for Eric. Thank you for. I'm looking at the screen. I'm thinking you're on the upper left corner. It says Grace Group. So nice to meet you, and thank you, Eric, for asking me to speak. And I see a bunch of people on here that I know, Rick and Dawn, and thank you for being here. And my sponsor, Derek from Hattiesburg. And I dig, and I don't know when this happened, but I dig a format and I don't want to say like rules and regulations, but just the format that you all read, and in particular that last statement you read around the seventh tradition, you mentioned something about privilege and responsibility, and I really liked it. I might have to, Jeannie, get that reading from you, because I thought it's really cool, and I don't know if that's necessarily just a Zoom, an online reading, but and then you talked about primary purpose. So those were two things that just stuck out. And like, I think like, why do we have all this readings before, and why do we have a forward, and why do we have a, and the longer I'm sober and I'm connected and I'm open to listening, the more I hear, I should say, the more my higher power allows me to hear. And just that one reading about privilege, we always read how it works, but that was really cool. So thanks for reminding me of not only the seventh tradition, but as a speaker, the privilege and responsibility to be able to speak, the honor to be able to share something that hopefully someone will hear. And I will, Julius, welcome to this meeting too. I want to say I wrote your phone number down too, and so I'm glad you're here. You said your first meeting was earlier today, and anyone celebrating anything, but. First and foremost, I'll mention a couple things, and that's I have a sobriety date. It's February 9th, 2005. I have a home group, and it meets on Tuesday night. It's Between the Covers. It's a big book study. It meets at 6:30. It is an enthusiastic group of drunks that walk through this not this particular big book, but the big book, the basic text of Alcoholics Anonymous. In this book contains the steps, the 12 steps of the program outlined. And I have a commitment there, a service commitment there, and I have a sponsor, and he's on this call. He's on this. Derek T is my sponsor from Hattiesburg, Mississippi, and just seeing a few of you, and again having the honor to speak just always brings back. I just think back and recall on my journey and what I'll call my transformation. And so the other thing I'll mention is, and I just want to say this sort of housekeeping stuff is. My daughter's in the other room, and I'm solo. So I'm only saying that because if something comes in and either taps on me or I get interrupted, it's a 9-year-old. Her name is Lily. She's in 3rd grade, and she's eating pizza right now in the other room. So I got her all set up right before we started, and I said, I'll be about 45 minutes. So maybe I'll be less, maybe I'll be more, who knows? Maybe I'll be 10 minutes. Hopefully I'll speak, and as the Spirit, tells. But if I get interrupted, that's why. And occasionally, if you can't hear me, just either wave or give me a thumbs up, because I'm using a headset that I don't love, but it seems to work. So I just want to mention those too. But like I said, it really is a privilege. I was thinking back, and then even in that format, Eric, one of the things you sent me, it says each individual in the personal stories describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. And higher power, I choose to call my higher power God. The connection that I have that keeps me sober is God for me, and that took a little bit of time to establish that connection and develop that relationship, and I believe that's what I'll talk about. I mean, I do want to qualify, and I was thinking of a few things. One is when we read how it works, there's that neat line that says there is one who has all power, that one is God. And I heard a speaker talk about, like, if God has all the power, that doesn't leave me, if he has 100% of the power, that leaves me with little. And I like that idea, when I turn it over, when I do God's will, things seemed, I stay sober a day at a time and things seem to work out better. But I heard that again, that idea of seeking. But what I was thinking about is, like I said, I told you my sobriety date, but I was thinking about these things, and I'll start with these. So, God willing, in a few months, I'll celebrate an anniversary, a 20-year anniversary. But 20 years ago, around this time, the summer of 2004, I had just been released from a federal prison camp in Yankton, South Dakota, and I was thinking about, and actually I thought about all this when Julius, when you announced that you were at your first meeting. I just suddenly, like, I have this piece of paper, and suddenly I was like, wait, there's someone at their first meeting or early on in sobriety, and I was thinking about sort of the trial period of exploration for me in Alcoholics Anonymous. And for me, that was when I was released in the summer of 2004. So, August, September, October, really up until my sobriety date, which was February 9th, 2005. So there was like a 6-month period there where I was unsure. And Derek and Rick, I knew early on too, were there firsthand. I was unsure that I belonged here, that I was one of you, that I was an alcoholic. Drugs were a big part of my story. I'm not going to talk about drugs, but I'm going to mention that. I thought maybe drugs were not alcohol. I think there was other things. Maybe I dug the idea around the mental illness and maybe having some full flight from reality. There were some things you were saying that I believed and might be helpful, but the idea that I was an alcoholic, and again, this is all first step stuff, was something that I wasn't sure about. And it was sort of like my trial period. And the trial period really ended, and it started with me going to my first few meetings. And this is truly when, for me, that introduction to God or my higher power, unbeknownst to me, was happening. It was like I was unwilling to believe, to be open enough, to be honesty, to admit these things, but little things were happening. And one of them was the direction to move into a sober house, which was not my idea. One of them was the direction to get a sponsor, not my idea. One of them was to get a home group from that sponsor. I just remember I was at the Mustard Seed. That was an early meeting I went to. It was a Wednesday meeting, and it was a big book study. And we'd read the big book, and they would look up words, and it was like, it would just be like, it would be words that I thought everyone would know, and someone would raise their hand and be like, word, and I would just be like, come on, you know what that word, it's like word. Every sentence, someone would be like word, and they'd pull out this big dictionary and they would look up that word. And another great reason why, like, again, I thought I knew the definitions to every word. I think I knew everything, and I know what every word means. And by going to that meeting, it opened me up to understanding some things that I didn't know. But one of the other things I did at that meeting was I asked what a sponsor was. And I wasn't sure what that was. I heard people talk about it, and Derek may not remember this, but like, I remember going up to him and asking him what a sponsor was. And I don't think I wanted a sponsor. I merely wanted a definition. It was like, definition, sponsor. And I'm sure from my recollection, he gave me his phone number and he said, I'll be one. I'll be your sponsor. Call me at this number. We'll work. And I was like, well, I think you have it. I put my hand up. I just wanted the definition. I thought you would pull out the book and give me a definition of sponsor. I didn't actually want a sponsor. I was merely inquiring. And here we are 20 plus years later, and we've developed quite a relationship. I just spent some time at a retreat with Derek and Rick and quite a few other people. Dawn's been there before. And so that's just kind of neat. And like I said, and then I got a sponsor, and he said, why don't you get a home group? And it's a meeting you'll go to every week, no matter what. And maybe you'll get a couple more meetings that you go to, and people will get to know you. And then maybe you'll get a service commitment at that home group. And, it was just all information. I wrote down the word sponge because at some point I just started to listen, and I became sort of a sponge. And I don't know why. Again, it wasn't my idea. It didn't seem to make sense. Again, I told you, I think this was, a lot of it was, I thought of just a big misunderstanding. Even when I was in federal prison, I just thought maybe it had me confused with someone else. It was just a little bit of a funk. Maybe I was in a little bit of a phase. I was just going through a little phase right there for a few years, and you're just all making too big a deal about this. Too big a deal. And what I came to find out is, again, the evidence suggests otherwise. if that makes sense. The evidence, if I look at my drinking career and pre-sobriety, and you looked at that, and you don't even have to look at my daughter and what I have now, but just looked at that, most would say, alcoholic or not, that there was something going on there. There was something going on. I remember a friend of mine says, is when I finally admitted and raised my hand and said, I'm David, I'm an alcoholic, admitted I was powerless. It was unanimous. It was like everyone else knew, but when I finally said I'm an alcoholic, it was unanimous. And I always chuckle about that. But again, it was sort of like my trial period. But I want to read something really quick. I don't know why this just opened it, but in the back of the book, there's a spiritual experience, and it's in an appendix, and most of you have read this, but this, and I'm kind of jumping around, but this line here, it says, he finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self-discipline. With few exceptions, our members find they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource, which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves. And I don't know why that just jumped out, but that was important for me to read. That appendix, the doctor's opinion and the appendix were really important for me to read. And I remember that even to this day. Whenever I'm in the doctor's opinion, it was like a doctor. That was like a light sort of went on that a doctor was giving me this information about my condition. And I started to believe that. You all had told me, and you told me because you shared your stories. And I started going to some meetings and taking some of those suggestions that Derek and others gave me. And like I said, I became open. And but I am just going to back up really quick and tell you that I didn't come from an alcoholic family. I was born in New York. I have 3 wonderful sisters, a mom and dad. My father's passed. There wasn't a lot of alcohol or drinking. I always think there was a liquor cabinet in our house, and it was like part of a piece of furniture. And in the liquor cabinet were like the same bottles that my parents had, like from their wedding. Like they got married in 1950, 50 something, and then there was like a 10-year anniversary. There was another bottle, then a New Year's, and they just collected bottles, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, and that was the liquor cabinet, and there was a lot of liqueurs, and my dad just liked the fancy bottles. We never drank anything, my mom had never drank anything, and really until I started drinking, and I did have one sister, an older sister that drank too. None of that was ever cracked, and I really think my dad, he really thought like, he would sip something or something would open, it would like everything aged. That bottle of red wine that was open 51 years ago was better now in 1976. Like he just didn't know. He was unaware. He was not one of us. He was not an alcoholic. And I just remember this about my father. The only drinking I remember seeing is my dad. Occasionally when we go out, my dad would order an apricot stone sour. That was his drink. And it was in a short glass, and it was like apricot liqueur, so it wasn't very strong. And he ordered it with a lot of on the rocks and a lot of fruit. That's the one thing I always remember. Like my dad liked a lot of fruit. He liked like a carrot and a olive and a tomato and a pickle it was like a fruit salad on top of this small glass with a lot of ice. And the two things I remember, and I laugh at myself for saying this, is that occasionally he would return it because it was too strong. I don't know how this thing could be too strong with the fruit salad and the ice, and it was too strong. And then occasionally too, he would turn to my mom and he would stop drinking and tell my mom about this feeling he would get. Either he'd get tired or he'd yawn or he'd just feel uncomfortable, just out of sorts. And he didn't like the feeling. He didn't like the effect that it produced on him, as many non-alcoholics do. And I don't want to say he was a tempered drinker. He was a non-alcoholic, and that's what happens, I think, to a lot of non-alcoholics. Something happens, and they go, "Oh, I better stop now. I got a headache," and something like that. That effect, that feeling, is what I've heard many of us go for. We're looking for. I'm looking for that feeling, and then infinitum, and over and over. And I just remember that, and that was my experience around drinking. And it wasn't until many years later when my oldest sister got married and I was drinking screwdrivers with a cousin. I remember drinking. I was at my oldest sister's wedding. by O'Hare at a Hyatt. And I just remember getting so sick. I remember waking up, throwing up that night. And all I remember is what people told me. I blacked out, and they told me I was dancing around the hotel singing If I Was a Rich Man, which is from Fiddler on the Roof. And it seems so appropriate. Like that would be such a song that someone like me would sing, at 12 or 13. And I just remember, I remember getting sick and drunk, but something, alcohol did something for me that I loved. I knew that I wanted to do that again. And even despite getting sick and, but that was just enough because my dad had always told me for years, like, you're such a dreamer. You don't live in this reality. I live in a fantasy land. That was a big thing my dad said. You live in this fantasy land. You don't live in, and that goes along with me, like, not following rules. And what I know about me is that alcohol did something for me. I was an awkward, and I hear this a lot in the rooms. I was just awkward. I didn't feel like I fit in. I had that whole, that awkwardness, and I felt like alcohol, I was always sort of searching for something, and alcohol and many years later, drugs did something for me that I couldn't find elsewhere, or at least for me. And in getting a sponsor and making a beginning on the steps, I learned a little bit more about alcoholism and really the grave nature of alcoholism and so forth. But I just, like I said, there's not, I have a twin sister. She's not an alcoholic, and a couple others. And I think about this too. Like, so my twin sister was, so she got straight A's in school. And I don't know how this relates, except for at the end. And first of all, I thought like the eggs split and I got screwed. That's the first thing I always thought. I thought like twins, somehow the egg splits. And, here I'm the alcoholic. And here, from the get-go, I'm thinking, talk about the ultimate resentment. Like at birth, I'm thinking I got screwed. And my sister, I always bring up my sister, she got straight A's. She was like first chair in the clarinet. She was captain, and she's captain of soccer, two sports, soccer. But she always had a boyfriend, a good-looking boyfriend, and she had plans, and she knew something. I thought, she had like the playbook, and it wasn't really until working the steps and getting sober and acknowledging, the difference between my sister and I was, my sister got A's because she studied. It's just like, it was like, whoa, that's why she got A's. My sister got boyfriends because she showered and she brushed her teeth, like she took care of herself, like my sister was good at soccer because she practiced, and that stuff was like unheard of. Like, wait, so why does she get to get A's? Like, she studied, that's why, I constantly want to be here, and I'm here, but I either don't know the plan or I'm unwilling to take the steps to follow to get there. I want to take the angle. I really want the shortcut to get myself there. I want the cash and prizes, but I'm unwilling often to do the work. And that was sort of the story of my life. And I'll really fast forward because with me drinking, there's a direct correlation between my drinking and drug use and the trouble I get in. So just because I ended up in federal prison does not make me an alcoholic. Just because I lie, cheat, and steal, none of that makes me an alcoholic. There are a lot of people that lie, cheat, and steal that aren't alcoholics. They don't have a problem with alcohol, or for me, crack cocaine or heroin. Just because they're cheaters and liars and stealers. I am an alcoholic because of what happens to me when I put alcohol in my system. When I take a drink, there's something, one of the three parts of the disease. I have a physical allergy to alcohol. So when alcohol gets in my, something different, it didn't happen to my dad, the way it happens to me. And I take that first drink and really all bets are off. And I talk about that correlation for me, but, drinking led to other things, but it also led me to make decisions based on self that ended up, and choices that ended me up in federal prison. And then I have this mental obsession that always takes me back to that first drink. That was a second thing I learned. And I sort of understood that, this phenomenon of craving, this obsession of the mind, and that same obsession, that lie that it tells me that it'll be different. Or again, like I told you, it was just a big misunderstanding. You've got me confused with someone else. Like, come on, you're making too big, all the lies that'll tell me that I'm not an alcoholic and I can have that first drink, whatever the lie is for me. again, all that stuff I told you, and then that hole, that spiritual, that emptiness, that I chased, and that I filled with alcohol and other things, and even to this day, I just, I'll get unspiritually fit, and I'll feel like I felt as a young kid, or later, and I need something to change. I need a change. I need an escape. I need a shift. I need something. And if I'm unwilling to do the work in Alcoholics Anonymous, I'll look somewhere else to just to feel right, just to feel either to get away. And so again, I'm an alcoholic that the more I drink, the more trouble I get in. And there's a lot of stories between my first drink and federal prison, but there's 2 evictions, but none of that really means anything. There's a failed marriage. There's many jobs in that time, and my conviction was bank fraud. And I think the hand of God was with me all along. But what I do know is the hand of God was there that year that I was getting that I was convicted, and I went through court, and I went really through that process with the law. I mean, I think I know now, I didn't know it then, that God was somewhere, my higher power was saying, hey, you can't stop this on your own, so I'm going to intervene, and I'm going to make it such that you'll be somewhere either separated from alcohol, or you'll understand this nature and start to learn a little bit about you, and that's when I think really God intervened and really try to show me really recovery, so to speak, and I went to federal prison. Now, when I was there, I wasn't thinking that. Like when I was withdrawing from alcohol and drugs when I was at Yankton, South Dakota, and I wasn't thinking like, wow, this is amazing. Like, I'm so glad that God took me out of the mire of my alcoholism and put me in this wonderful place in this dorm with 22 other men, so that I could get sober. I wasn't thinking that, but I know that now, and it was shortly thereafter that I was separated from alcohol that I started to get some clarity. And in many of the stories in the big book, and certainly at the beginning chapters, a lot of those stories, we talk about separating ourselves from alcohol first. That's really the first step. And again, I don't suggest it being separated from alcohol in that way, but that was my story, and I was separated from alcohol that way. But I started to take care of myself. I started doing something. For some reason, I started taking some suggestions, like, go to the gym, don't eat that, there was a drug alcohol program, go. And I really started to change. I really believe for that year and a half or almost 2 years, God was with me. God kept me protected and safe, and God loved me so that I could do that time and get out and be open to this new life. And there was a real transformation there in Yankton, South Dakota. And I'd like to say I stayed sober and got out and all was, but I didn't. And now we're up to really those 6 months where I sort of was, sort of like, what happened? What happened? And what happened was I had this inkling of willingness, and I was open to change. I was open to something, like I mentioned, and I started taking some suggestions. And like I said, I remember that last drink. I was working at an Italian restaurant, and I went out one night, and I was living in a sober home. I think this is important. I was living in a sober home because, again, this was that 6 month period where I was still unsure, despite, again, that evidence that said, hey, if there's some stuff here that says you might have a problem. Despite that evidence, I went out with some people one night at a restaurant. I had been going to AA. I was living in a sober home, and they said, hey, you want to go out with us? And I said, yeah. And I went to a bar on Lincoln in Chicago and with some customers, and they were watching a women's soccer game, and at a bar I would never go to. I was in a sober home at a night where I was supposed to be home after work. We go home after work, and a drink sounded like a good idea. I don't know. It was just one of those. I've heard that story. Someone said, hey, you want a drink? And I said, sure. And I took that Kettle One, I think, on the rocks, and I just took that sip. And I knew something was wrong with me. I knew what that drink did to me because it led to a second and a third and a fourth, but I instantly knew there was something wrong. It was there. It was king alcohol. I had a surrender there, and I continued to drink, and I got drunk, and I woke up the next day in the sober home, and I knew. So February 9th, and I remember Derek was one of the first people I called, and I was unsure of what to do. I lived in a sober home, and I just drank, and there aren't a lot of rules. There were some suggestions and there were some rules. one of them is maybe don't drink. I mean, you're at a sober home, maybe don't drink. Or try not to drink is one of the rules. Maybe if you don't want to make your bed, that's not the biggest deal. You won't get kicked out. Or, if you don't want to do, we had different things if you didn't go to the fourth meeting by accident, but drinking is one of the things they kind of poo-poo. And I said, what am I going to do? And Derek said, you got to tell them that you drank, and you got to tell the house man. And I was like, I can't do that. I'm going to get kicked out. And I think I had a good cry, and I was scared. I didn't know what to do. And that transformation and that hand of God, the grace of God, not earned, but through the grace of God, I was able to tell my house manager and some others and be honest and take that first step and really admit that I was powerless over alcohol, really finally, and the obsession was just removed. Poof. I know that's not everyone's story around the obsession. For me, it was gone. It was gone, and I made a beginning on the steps with my sponsor, and it took some time to get through. Actually, I worked through 1, 2, and 3 pretty quick. My 4-step took quite some time, many years to do my 4-step, and there was some pain around that. And I didn't drink, and I got real active in Alcoholics Anonymous. Like I said, I was going to 4 or 5 meetings a week. I did service in multiple meetings. I sponsored guys. I got busy in Alcoholics Anonymous. I really made that beginning and made a great attempt at being sober and tried to carry the message as well as I could. And I've had a wonderful transformation now. My connection, I'm constantly seeking that connection with God. I want to say like waxes and wanes. I know a few things today, what it's like now. Well, I have a 9-year-old daughter that's in 3rd grade. She's in the other room, and I'm married, and I'm in my condo in the city. And geez, I couldn't. And the cash and prizes thing is almost nothing. Those are not. That's nice. It's wonderful that I have a job, the same job that I've had for 15 years, and I pay my bills and my mortgage, and I think I'm a wonderful father. I really do. I think if you ask my daughter, she'd say, you're a good dad. I really do. And I know how to love her. I mean, she's taught me more. That little girl has taught me more about myself than any, through God and the grace of God, that little girl has taught me more about me. I feel like she's a genius at 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. She's said some things to me where I've had to look at myself and said, wow. I don't know how many times I've had to say, like, you're 50, like I'm having a conversation, I'm like bantering with, she's 5 and her and I are going at it. I'm like, I'm 50 and you're 5 in my head. And I'm like, what is wrong? What is wrong with me? Why am I having this with a 5-year, so I have a wonderful life, but I really think it's the inside, it's the peace, it's the serenity, it's this conscious contact, it's this relationship that I developed with this power, with this understanding that I have. And I was going to a meeting, I was going to my home group on Tuesday, or maybe it was Sunday. Sunday I go to regular meetings on Saturday, Sunday, Tuesday. Last week I went on Monday and on a Thursday. I'll throw in other meetings in there too. And I was acknowledging how important it was for me to get to a meeting, to be around people. And for me, the transformation and that community, that fellowship for me is around people. It's being in a room with people and hearing the stories from other experiences from people and believing that can happen to me too, like seeing the transformation. Sometimes I don't see it in myself, but I can see it in you. And oftentimes, through God's grace, I do see it in me. And when I say I see it in me, I'll either say something or do something or act in a way or not act or not react in a way that I know is God inspired. It's just not me. I will just say something to a sponsee or to a client or my wife that is just not me. And I'll sometimes say it and say, who said that? I might even think that and think, who thought that? Like in my head, like that is not a reaction that the old David Kitsis would. It's out of self, it's out of body that I do things like that. I'm a guy that used to pull up to parking meters and I never paid anything. I never paid tickets. I never paid bills. I threw my garbage out of the window. I smoked and rules didn't apply. I didn't pay any bill. I didn't think it was for me, any of that. So I just didn't do any of that. And I guess fortunately or unfortunately, I flipped to the complete extreme. I used to spend money all the time, and I've completely flipped. I need to find some balance sort of in the middle, not in the cheating. Listen, I still need to pay my bills and all that, but somewhere in here, I need to find that balance for me where God can show me a way. But so the peace and the serenity and the it's just been wonderful. I mean, the things that I get, are all inside. Are all inside, and the opportunities that I get to share and to be of service are wonderful. And Julius, I'm really glad that you're here. Like I said, there's nothing. Someone was talking about, we're at the beginning of the book in my Tuesday meeting, we're reading the forwards, and I mentioned to you, I dig that stuff. I was a shortcut guy. I was an angle shooter. Get me there. And so the idea of working the steps, and one of the other things I think you read in one of the readings, I wrote it down. It says precisely how he recovered, and that was that was a neat. I don't know which reading that was, and I know that's also in the big book, and that was important for me to get a precise understanding. And I talked about definitions of not only what alcoholism was, but a better understanding of who I was. I lived in the vague. I'm real good at vague, or as a matter of fact, or maybe, or sorta, or I'll see you in 10 or 15. I'm very plus or minus. I lived in sort of the vague. And what I really need is that format and structure to say, hey, this is what we do in Alcoholics Anonymous. If you do what we do, you might get what we get. I mean, that was my experience. That was my experience. If you do what you do, or what I always did, you might get what you always get. I might be wrong. You may not. Again, my experience is I did what Derek did and what Rick did and what Dawn does, and my life's getting better. I try not to do what David used to do and the people he hung out with used to do, because I know where that's going to lead. And really, for me, all roads led to Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't have really another option when I came here. It was and I don't think I would have it any other way right now. I was thinking about I would never change any. No one's ever said to me, hey, how come you still go to those meetings? But I don't know why I'd ever not go to the meetings. It's such a small sacrifice for me to have this wonderful life. In the big book, there's a line that says, God, talking about God making too harsh terms. And I think I mentioned this recently. A speaker talked about making harsh terms, and I heard the speaker talk about is going to a meeting, is sharing now, is that a hard term? Is fellowship after meetings, are those harsh terms? Is going to an international convention, are those harsh terms or hard terms? And they're not. They're wonderful terms. And through God's grace, again, in this gift, I get to experience this wonderful life a day at a time. And that's the other thing I think that's neat is just that idea that just today, I didn't have the best day at work today. It wasn't the greatest. It's particularly difficult to finish work and just get spiritual all of a sudden, get to a meeting and just, it's not that easy for me to just all of a sudden make that connection. But the power and that available contact to that and that relationship is always available. It is always there. That energy, that source for me, that conscious contact is ever present. It is always there. It's up to me to take a minute or a second or 10 seconds and just make that connection. Hey, I'm here. I need help. This is what's going on. And if it's a pause, if it's, whatever it is, and that's just neat to know, that inner resource. When I read that at first, it's it talked about this unsuspected inner resource. I thought it was I was a comic book collector, and I thought, I always loved superheroes. And when I read that, I was that seemed like a superpower, tapping this unsuspected inner resource, this resource that I have, again, through this grace, which is this power, this seeking, which is God for me, is there. And it really is a superpower to me. It's something that's available to everyone if you so choose. And I've rambled long enough. Like I said, I'm glad I wasn't interrupted. It was wonderful to be able to share. Julius, I'm really glad that you're here, and find another meeting in person or on Zoom, and give your number out if you will. And someone had said to me, give your chance a chance. Just keep coming and see. If this meeting's not great, get a different one. grab a book, grab a sponsor like I did, and make a beginning. So with that, that's all I have, and I appreciate all of you. Thank you.
Recording stopped.